All right. Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well on this January the 24th. It's a lovely winter day here in Canada, which is perfect for this particular live stream we're doing today, which is all about driving a Tesla in the wintertime. And I just want to reiterate that this live stream is really geared towards anyone thinking of buying a Tesla or new Tesla owners. That being said, if there's some Tesla pros out there, we'd love you to participate in the live chat. Help us to answer questions. If things really get going, sometimes those questions just scroll so quickly. It's good to have some support from other people who have experience with their Tesla. All right, I'm back here with TeslaKevv, and thanks for joining again. We had a good show, I think, last time. So
thanks for having
probably
me.
more you than me. So I thought I'd have you back. But all right, so let's just kind of pull up the agenda here, and let's just kind of give people a flavor of what they can expect today. Oh, we have somebody on the chat here who just traded in their I guess Model 3 SR Plus for a long-range Model Y. That's pretty awesome. So hope it was a good experience. Not sure if you picked it up yet, but I'm hoping you have a really great experience with that. All right, so here's some of the things that we are going to cover today. And the background here is that I get a lot of questions, a lot of us Tesla YouTubers do, about driving in the wintertime. And they're really great questions. So I wanted to dedicate a show to kind of just address all of these questions that people have. And feel free to just ask questions in the comments section. And we're going to do our best to get to everybody's questions. We're going to talk about just general what to expect. We're going to talk about regen, lots of questions about what happens to regen when your battery is cold. What about strong regen on an icy surface? Those type of things. Some of the winter driving features like slip start, which is one of the features that can get you going if you're stuck, for example. Cold weather range loss. This is another really big topic that we'll probably spend quite a bit of time on. I know there's a lot of questions about this. And then kind of related to that, we're going to be talking about the charging strategies, which can help mitigate some of the issues arising with range loss. Matter of fact, I mean, if you do these mitigation strategies well, you'll probably never worry about it. And then lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about rear-wheel drive versus all-wheel drive. So I'll turn it over to my, I guess I'll call you the co-host. You're more than a guest at this point in time, TeslaKevv. So do you want to chime in with some thoughts before we get going?
Sure. Just a little bit of background on myself. So I have for those of you who weren't on the last call, I have a long-range Model 3 rear-wheel drive 2018 and a 2017 all-wheel drive 75D Model X. We've put an absolute ton of kilometers on both those vehicles. I put probably I'm trying to do the math here, 40,000 miles on my X in the first year I owned it, because my kids are in every tournament known to man, all over Canada and the United States. And so, have a lot of experience, cold weather driving, long distance driving, everything. So, I really hope you guys bring your questions today. This is going to be fun. So a lot of experience I'd love to share with you guys.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And while we're waiting for the questions to start rolling in, why don't we start off with a video? One of the very first questions that I got back in 2018 when I picked up, not picked up, I guess it would have been 6 months after picking up my Model 3 when winter started here in Canada, was how does that thing, house it in the snow? So we'll just start with a quick video that kind of, and I'll talk through what's going on as well. Let me just figure out how to do this. And you should say
it is a rear-wheel drive. It's a rear-wheel drive.
It is a rear-wheel drive. Yeah. And for those of you who haven't seen any of my videos, I should probably also qualify a little bit. So I've owned Tesla Model 3, which I've traded in for a Model Y recently. I picked up my Model 3 in June of 2018. and also a Model X. And I've had the Model X since September of 2017. And so now I have the Model X, Model Y, and previously I had the Model 3. All right, so let's just share this video here, and I'm just going to play on it, and we'll just kind of chat through it. So this was, I think it was November of 2018, and it was the first big snowfall. And with a rear-wheel drive Model 3, I wanted to kind of see just how good it would be in the snow. Now, I do want to preface it with say that these are winter tires. I highly recommend winter tires for your Tesla if you're going to experience any winter weather. And we'll get to why later in this live stream. But here I'm trying to spin it out, and I can't. I cannot do a donut. I can't do anything. This is with the stock settings, so I haven't changed any of the settings in the vehicle. It just automatically will just start. Well, thank you very much, Mother Frunker. This is the first time anyone's ever donated to me, so thank you very much. I really do appreciate that. Where was I? Okay. So it will not spin out. Kevin, what are your thoughts and observations about the video, and what context would you add given your experience with the Model 3 in the wintertime?
So I think the first thing you should probably let these folks know is they could probably tell, but it's about 4 or 5 inches of snow.
Yes.
So a good amount. It's fresh. So, some would argue that, you get a lot more traction in fresh snow than you do in compacted snow. I think the first thing I'd point out is you do have snow tires, and there's been a lot of talk about Teslas being a lot heavier, and that aids with stability, and that is true. It also aids snow tires in gripping. I would point out though that if you don't have snow tires, the weight sometimes is not an advantage, right? So if the tires can't grip, the extra weight provides additional momentum or inertia that the tires just can't work with, right? But my experience with the rear-wheel drive Model 3 in the snow has been, I've never gotten stuck, put it that way. I've been frustrated because I like to go to parking lots and have fun and do donuts too, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that later when we throw on the slip start discussion. But yeah, it's awfully tough to, on purpose, put the car out of control, unless you almost run into a snowbank, like someone I know. So.
Yes, we've got a video of me running into a snowbank. We will get to that. It's on the what you don't do, and it doesn't matter if you're driving a Tesla or any other car. If you've got some ice underneath your wheels and you're doing things that you shouldn't be doing, you're going to pay the price. But we'll get to that in a moment. Yes. So, and we're going to talk a lot about rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive, and we're going to do that kind of, intermixed with all the different topics as opposed to have it as its own topic. Because a lot of times I get a question about, would you buy the SR Plus, which is rear-wheel drive, over an all-wheel drive? Like if you just can't squeeze the all-wheel drive into your budget, and you live in a northern climate and you have winter and you have snow, can you drive the SR Plus in the rear-wheel drive? And I always answer that question with yes, you can, absolutely. You must have snow tires. I always say that as well. And it's perfectly good in the snow. I have really no complaints about my Model 3 when I drove it over 2 winters. It behaved predictably and never really got me in trouble unless I was trying to get myself in trouble.
And I'd actually throw out that I used to have a BMW that was rear-wheel drive, and let's just say there's not much of a comparison. The ultimate driving machine left a lot to be desired in the snow. So,
all right. So fantastic. Just looking over at the questions, seeing if there's anything that we can address thus far. People are sitting on their questions. That's okay. We'll get to them. Why don't we start with the getting stuck? And I can tell you, and I'm going to talk about the Model 3 that I had again, because rear-wheel drive, that's kind of the worst case scenario. And I only ever got stuck once, Kevin. And I ironically, I was doing a live stream at the time, and it was on a steep incline, and I stopped in the middle of the steep incline and on purpose to see whether or not the rear-wheel drive could get going. And yeah, it didn't. So there's a feature that the Teslas have called slip start. I always call it slipstream because I don't know, just slipstream. It's the words that are in my brain, I guess. Slip start. And it got me out of that being stuck, no problem. And this again was on a very icy hill. It was actually in the middle of a snowstorm, and I was able to get out of it with slip start. Have you ever had to use slip start yourself, Kevin?
I've never had to use slip start to actually prevent myself from getting stuck. I use it a fair bit to play around in the car. So, I have learned how to do spin outs and various different other things when we're playing around, but it only happens when you turn on slip start. So never had to use it to get out of a situation, but I could see how in some cases it would work, and hopefully it would work well. But no, never had to use it.
Okay. We have a comment here. I wanted to pull this up and see if we can talk about it. I'm actually curious if Jean Herns has snow tires or not. He's indicated he's been disappointed with the snow ice traction, especially when turning right or left. Can you let us know in the comments if you have snow tires? I'd just be very curious about that. Because, and the reason why, it's actually a good segue into the next video. And I'm going to talk about my Model Y for a moment, and it's related to this particular comment. Now, here in Canada, and I'm assuming other northern climates, the default is that you get your vehicle with what's called all-season mud and snow. That's what they call them. And they're maybe they're marginally better than a summer tire, but not by much. And if you don't have a proper set of tires, I'm going to tee up another video here. Kevin, while I'm teeing that up, maybe if you've got anything to add to that conversation, then we'll get that video going.
Yeah, I see in the comments he uses 19-inch Viking 7s, Conti Viking 7s. Those are great.
Oh, okay.
Those are great snow tires, actually.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, so Quebec does have that bylaw where you have to have winter tires. Can you explain a little bit more in the comments? Yeah, I'm just very curious about it.
Yeah. That is I'd love to know that too. There's also another question about someone asking about the difference between an internal combustion engine car and a Tesla. When you're hitting ice, normally what you do is you take your foot off the gas and kind of try to get control without touching the brakes. In a Tesla, when you take your foot off, the regen kicks in. So the tires try to grab and start to slow the car to regenerate the battery. And normally that does a really good job of slowing the car without locking the brakes. If the tires slip, I don't know how often you've been in this situation, Paul, but if the tires start slipping under regen, the regen immediately turns off. And so the car then reverts to more of a cruise like an internal combustion engine where the wheels slip freely. But the computer does try to re-engage the regen ever so slightly until it gets grip again. So I still think in any case it's still better than sort of not having a regen, because it keeps the car much more stable when you're slowing down on ice. To answer your question, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, my personal experience with the regen is that it's never been an issue for me in winter driving. The Model 3, I had the long range rear wheel drive, and the rear wheel drive definitely has, I call it less bite. The regen has less bite than the Tesla Model X or the Model Y all wheel drive that I have. And I've taken the Model Y out in lots of conditions like you see here. And I just I have not had an issue with the regen and losing any type of control. But it's a good segue into this video. We were going to talk about these stock tires that come with your vehicle. And I'm just going to hit play on this video here. Okay, so here I'm trying to spin it out here, and it starts off. It's doing okay. It is, there is movement there, as you can tell. And as I turn this corner here and essentially gun it. And by the way, there's nobody around. There's no cars around. Um, so in case anyone was curious, but you can see now this is with the stock tires, and I have to aggressively manage the vehicle. So definitely a tip for you, if you haven't purchased a Tesla yet. These all season, quote on all season tires, to me, they just don't cut it. You spent so much money on the vehicle already. Buy those winter tires.
Yeah, definitely.
Kevin, your thoughts?
No, definitely. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the cars are heavier than regular internal combustion cars, and it really, the actual weight really helps snow tires do a good job. It exacerbates the situation though when you don't have snow tires, because what little grip you do have with the all season tires, it tends to put a lot more pressure on those tires, to with less traction. So I do find that it's almost a compounding factor in either safety on the snow tires, or in lack of control without. So
Okay. So we have a question here. Anything to be aware of when purchasing winter tires, rim issues? I'm going to defer to TeslaKevv on this, because he's like a tire guy. He knows everything about tires and rims and stuff. So over to you.
we could spend the rest of this live stream talking about tires and wheels. First thing I want to mention is the Model Y and the refreshed Model 3 now use Bluetooth sensors for the tire pressure sensors. You cannot, as far as I know, as of right now, there are no third-party Bluetooth sensors. So if you're thinking of going aftermarket on the wheels, or outside of Tesla, you'll need to get the sensors from Tesla. Okay, so they're not your typical 433 megahertz standard that all other cars use, or even the previous models 3X and S. They're all Bluetooth now. So and that's, I mean, I think probably the industry is going to go that way, but as of right now, that's something to be very careful about. The second thing I would say is, when purchasing winter tires or rims, if you go outside of Tesla, is make sure you go to a tire place or a dealer that has a lot of experience with Teslas. So, even the most basic things like jacking the car up using the appropriate jack pads. I mean, Paul and I have talked about this a lot. So, and just having the various different understandings of the differences between the hub sizes across the different models. We have different hub sizes, even within the models themselves. You have different hub sizes. The Model 3 Performance has a different hub than the Model 3 Long Range or Standard Range Plus. So going to a shop that really knows their business is imperative. And lastly, I would say, I'm a big fan of outside rims and tires. I've got a tire guy who I love, but the aftermarket tires don't have the foam insulation that Tesla. When you buy tires from Tesla, they have a quieting foam that as it lines the tires. You don't have that in the aftermarket tires, and so there is a little bit. I mean, you'll save a ton of money, but at the same time, you'll give up a little bit of the sound dampening inside the tire as well. So that's something. And one last thing is size. I get a lot of questions on this, and the common practice among tire winter driving is to go with a skinnier tire in the winter. I've tried it with my Model 3 rear-wheel drive, and it's been fine. But I do know that I do notice that the tire gives up the grip a lot easier when pushing it on the accelerator, and so I don't have a recommendation as to whether or not I would go with a skinnier tire with a Tesla or not. I've gone from my stock is 235s and I've gone down to 215s on my winters. When these are due, I don't know if I'll do it again. So I haven't driven. This is my first winter with this new size, and so I'm still on the fence.
All right. Thanks for that, Kevin. One of the things that we didn't talk about with the regen, we just touched it briefly, but I wanted to make sure that we talked a little bit about why you lose regen when the battery is cold. And for the most part, that's mainly because the lithium-ion batteries don't like to be cold. And if you try to, basically what happens is when there's regen, it takes the kinetic energy from the motors and basically uses that energy to recharge the battery. And when the battery's cold, you don't want to be throwing a lot of charge into a cold battery. So the battery management system kind of says, hey, battery's cold. I'm not going to allow regen right now. And so that's basically what's happening. And so it's a good thing. It's protecting your battery. And there are definitely strategies to minimize your regen loss. And we'll tie that together with the cold weather driving and the cold weather tips that we'll get to momentarily. Did you have anything else to add to that, Kevin, in terms of what happens when it's cold and the regen?
So just 2 points, I guess. One, to address a question in the comments. Ron's asking if regen performs. Yeah, that's the question. If regen performs like the hill descent button on a all-wheel drive truck, and the answer is if full regen is enabled, meaning that the battery is warm. It absolutely does. It will really limit your descent on an icy hill. Now that's a perfect segue into exactly what you were talking about, which is if the battery is cold, the car will limit the regen because it doesn't want high amounts of current going into the battery while it's cold. And so the car does warm up the battery as you go, or if you precondition. We're going to talk a lot about preconditioning. It's a very simple way of improving the efficiency of your car, but the side effect is that it gives you full regen from the moment you get in the car, right? And so it's important to make sure that your battery is warmed whenever you can do it, just because it creates a very predictable drive with your full regen in place, right? And so when you have to make adjustments when you don't have your full regen. I notice it a lot if my car is cold, and my advice is always to whenever possible, just to make sure your battery is warmed up so that that you get a predictable drive and a predictable regen.
I just want to go back to one of these comments here from Dax. So winter driving skills also plays a role. I do want to touch on that because sometimes it doesn't matter what car you drive, right? You need to adhere to the basic rules of winter driving. And so I think that's an important comment, and that applies to not just Tesla or it applies to every vehicle that you're driving. And I'll tee up my snowbank incident here just to kind of
I was wondering if you're going to do that.
Just to show you, what will happen in any vehicle if you're doing something stupid.
What lack of skill looks like? Is that what you're teeing up?
Lack of skill, but this time lack of skill on purpose. Can I say that?
Nice
Okay. Let me just describe what's going on here. So, empty parking lot. Here, there was quite a bit of snow. There was probably about 6 inches of snow. That's about 15 centimeters. And I'm just again trying to see if I can get the rear end to spin or to fishtail. And I do not have slip start on here, and I can't get it to fishtail or do anything. This was my Model 3 rear wheel drive. So now here's where I do something stupid. I gain some speed, and it doesn't matter what car you're driving, this is going to happen. So fortunately there wasn't any damage, but the laws of physics apply, right? You've got speed, you've got ice, you do a sharp turn, doesn't really matter what you're driving, that's what's going to happen. So I thought this comment from Dax was quite appropriate for any winter discussion driving talk, right? So
one of the questions too is on clearance, on the clearance of Teslas. I think it's from Evan. Evan, one of the so the Model S and X have air suspensions, so clearance is never an issue. You can raise and lower the car up and down. In the Model 3 and the Y, I think there was a lot of chatter on the forums about lack of clearance for the Model Y. They thought the car would be a lot higher relative to the 3, and I think it's about, correct me if I'm wrong, Tesla Canuck, but I think it's about 6 inches. There's a 6 inch difference between the Model 3 and the Model Y. Is that correct?
So yeah, I mean, this is an interesting question. I think it's supposed to be about 6 inches, not the difference, but the actual height of the car, right? There isn't a 6 inch difference between the Model 3 and the Model Y, right? That's so just to clarify there.
Sorry, 6
yeah.
centimeters. I think
yeah.
6 centimeters.
That's okay. Oh, 6 centimeters. Okay.
6 centimeter difference, I think.
Yeah, and I haven't actually gone out and measured mine, right? But I mean to, because I saw there was a story not too long ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, where there's been a lot of variability in the height of the Model Y. I don't know if you read that story, Kevin, but it is supposed to be higher off the ground than a Model 3, 100%.
Yeah. And there's someone also noted the performance versions in both the Y and the 3 are lower, which is true. It's a lowered suspension.
Yeah, so definitely. Yeah.
But I've not experienced, I don't know about you, I have not experienced any issues in the deeper snow with clearance. It just tends to do a pretty good job of plowing the road. So at least in my experience.
All right, let's see here. Let's pull up another comment here. Okay, let's talk about range. that's the thing that I see right in the middle of that comment. So, and I know a lot of people have been waiting this, because it's probably the biggest concern that I think a lot of new prospective buyers and new owners have. And so let's get the the elephant, is it the big elephant in the room or whatever it is, out of the way. Yes, you're going to lose some of your range. In a internal combustion engine vehicle, you also lose range in the winter as well. Not as much, but it does happen. So I guess the question is around, what is the circumstance in which you're driving, because there are a lot of variables at play here. So how cold is it? Have you preconditioned your battery? Has it been parked in a garage? Is it parked outside, exposed to the wind? So there's just a number of variables here. So I can tell you about some of the experiments that I've done to kind of give you some real world kind of examples. And I've got some videos too as well. I can put those in the comments later. But I've done some extensive testing. And with the Model 3 at around minus 30 degrees Celsius, which is kind of a worst case scenario. I live just north of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. It doesn't happen very often, but once in a while it'll hit minus 30. And in that circumstance, I found that I was losing about 45% of my range with the Model 3, and about the same with the Model X. Kevin, do you want to just start there with your experience on a percentage basis, worst case scenario, and see if we are finding the same things?
Yeah, I mean, let me add a couple more variables to the equation. So what I found is I've done a number of experiments as well, real world experiments, and I find that that if you're driving in the city, so there's a lot of stop and go and there's regen, I find you lose a lot less range than if you're traveling at sort of a high speed on the highway, which kind of makes sense. But what I really kind of want to hit home is the importance of preconditioning the car. So I find I can lose 30% easy. If I just get in a cold car and drive, not even at -30, at like -20, I would lose 30%. But that same drive, I would lose 10% if the car's nicely preconditioned. So, and Tesla makes it easy, right, from with scheduling and all that other stuff that we'll talk about. But preconditioning the car goes a long way in reducing the effect of draining your battery, right? Because the car operates much better when the battery is warm and the regen is enabled, and it takes a while for for that to happen when you just get into a cold car and drive, right? So
yeah, so again, we wanted to kind of give you like the worst case scenario type of thing, and that's the worst that I've seen is, I wanted to pull up this comment by Kaushik. I call him KK from Twitter. So and yeah, he religiously, he's a data guy, obviously, and he religiously kind of tracks everything. So the data that he has here, I would rely on from what I know of KK. So yeah, and I noticed he's got the 20-inch wheels here. So the larger wheels will definitely impact your range, right? The stock Model Y, he's got a Model Y, but the stock Model Y comes with 19-inch wheels on it. So let's talk about mitigation, right? So other than preconditioning, which we'll get to in more detail very shortly, what are the things that you can do as a Tesla owner to perform better than let's say this type of a worst case scenario, right? So having the smaller tires comes to mind, right? So if you have the 19 instead of the 20, you want to keep those aero rim covers on, because they do contribute to your efficiency. And perhaps the biggest thing is to slow down. Right? When it's -30 and you want to improve your range, maybe driving 120 kilometers an hour is something you want to maybe dial back a little bit, right? It can make a huge difference. What am I missing, Kevin? I'm sure I'm missing some stuff there.
no, I think you hit the major ones. Using your aero rims. I'll be honest, guys. I'm not a big fan of the look of the arrows. I've gone on record very often saying how much I dislike them.
It's polarizing.
Yes, it is. But I do use them as my winter tires, and I said I don't know whether I'd go back. Earlier in the conversation, I talked about using smaller, skinnier tires, which I am using on my Model 3. I will say, I've given up a little bit of traction, I've noticed, but I have gained quite a bit in range, going from my summers, which are oversized 255s, down to my winters, which are undersized at 215. It's a massive, massive difference, almost to the point where there's not much of a difference between my my mileage, if you want to call it that, between summer and winter, because I take such a big hit by putting the oversized summer tires on. So, tires are a big thing, and also speed. So I do a run to my brother's house, which is about I'm trying to do the math here. It's 250 kilometers, so around 160, 100 so miles, to a 2.5 hour drive, and I do it at all times of the year. So I have a lot of data on summer, winter, rain, snow, all that kind of stuff. And the major factor that impacts everything is the speed, right? So when I'm booking along at 75 miles an hour versus 60, there's a big difference there, right? And so in the wintertime, it's not hard to do 60 as opposed to 75 miles an hour, because usually traffic is slower and so on and so forth. But you're right, tire size and preconditioning and speed are the big three for sure.
Yeah, like I found that if you drive slow enough, right? Like if you're doing 90 kilometers an hour instead of 120, and it's -15 or so, you can get pretty close, like within 10% of rated range. At least I can, right? So I think the important takeaway here is that you have options, right? You can choose how much range loss you experience.
Yeah.
Do you think that's fair to say? Kev?
Yeah, for absolutely is. So yeah, that is the point, right? Is it's not like you're powerless in these type of situations. You actually have the ability to manage your range loss. And so if you know you got plenty of juice to get to wherever you want to go, fine. You know what? Knock yourself out. Don't precondition. Drive as fast as you want. Doesn't matter. You're gonna have lots of juice to get there. If range anxiety is a thing on a trip, and you're not sure if you're gonna make it, then there are lots of things you can do. The Model S and X has something called range mode. I don't know if you've ever done a test on range mode. I think
I have.
yeah, I think it saves a little bit.
Yeah.
And I also lower the vehicle to its lowest settings to reduce the drag in the Model S and X. Those are one of the benefits of having an air suspension. But other than that, the big three are things you can control, right? So
Yeah, and I think that's very important, takeaway for people who are kind of on the fence and kind of wondering about range loss. Now, it's also important to note before we get off range loss, and the next topic is going to be on preconditioning, but in the summertime, the opposite happens. So you actually get more range in the summertime, and typically I'll see about a 10% increase in range in the summer. Do you have any thoughts on that? Just to kind of tie off the topic, Kevin? Not the way you drive.
I was gonna say, you know what? Whatever range increase that the weather is giving me, I use up in let's say spirited driving.
Yes.
There's a reason I have 255s on my Model 3, and I do have dedicated summers on both my vehicles. So I and we haven't really talked about this because it's winter driving, but I do very much enjoy the driving dynamics of Teslas. Right? They handle very well. Their their speed is obviously well recorded, but I enjoy my driving in the summer very much, and so
Yeah.
I've tried to replicate some of the results you've got. And I have got them, but I can only maintain it for a very short period of time because, yeah, I enjoy the spirited driving. So,
So
chill mode should not even have been invented. So, sorry.
I was just going to get to that. Kevin gets triggered by chill mode, and I was just going to say that I can always tell when it's Kevin passing me. So, if you're on the spirited side of driving and wondering about range loss, Kevin's the guy to ask about that. So go ahead and fire away. So before we get to that preconditioning, just a little bit in seriousness about chill mode, and I'm wondering, I don't use it myself. Maybe. No, my wife uses it religiously, and she always outperforms me on getting better range. So I don't know. There's a lot of variables there, but maybe chill mode does help. I'll have to do a more scientific study on that, actually.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on that one, Paul.
Yeah. So Kevin, just to kind of get into the next topic, which is around preconditioning, you've always been super religious about preconditioning. And so I want to kind of throw this over to you because I shouldn't say rarely. I do precondition, but I rarely schedule. So, and scheduling is kind of, another thing that's in tandem with your preconditioning because you can use the two together to really manage your and maximize your range. Mm-hmm. So, Kevin, this is a perfect topic for you. Take it away, buddy.
Thanks. There's a couple of things. One is there is a difference between cabin preconditioning and battery preconditioning. Let me just start there. So one of the things that happens is when you plug your car in or when your car starts charging, the battery management system always makes sure that the battery is at the right temperature to receive its charge. And so you may start charging the car even though you're not planning on going anywhere or preconditioning, but the BMS, the battery management system, is going to pre-warm your battery, meaning that if you were to unhook it in the middle of that charge and get in the car might be stone cold because you didn't turn on the preconditioning of the cabin, but the battery will give you almost full regen because it's been charging and the battery has been warmed to accept the charge. So that's one thing I think most people don't understand. The second is when you decide you want to go somewhere, and either you turn on remotely precondition, manually turn it on, then the car will do two things. One, it'll precondition the battery, and it will also precondition the cabin. So you'll get. I hate. Black House Brew. I hate cold cars. I refuse to drive a cold car if ever possible. And having the ability inside a garage to turn your car on, which you obviously can't do with an internal combustion engine car, and let it precondition for, I've on really cold days, I've let it precondition for 45 minutes, right? And to make sure that I get my full regen. And so if you're asking, the next question is how much juice does that take, or how much battery percentage would that use? It depends on how cold it is, but just say at an average winter temperature of minus 10 degrees Celsius, you'd be looking at 3 or 4% in a Model 3 or a Model Y. And a Model X and S, because they're not quite as efficient, maybe 5 or 6%, right, of the battery to charge it from dead cold to full regen, right, and nice toasty warm steering wheel and seats, right? So that's a separation first between those two things, and then I don't know if you want to take questions on that, and then we can get into the scheduling of it, but
Yeah. Before we do, I do want to talk about not just how much energy it takes to do a preconditioning if you're not plugged in, but when you are plugged in, how much are you pulling from the grid, and what does it cost you to, let's say, precondition for 45 minutes, right? And from what I've seen on this is that it's going to pull anywhere from, I've seen as low as 2 kilowatt. Is it kilowatt hour?
a kilowatt hour, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. From the grid to as high as 6. So, it seems to vary depending on where it is in the battery warming up preconditioning process, right? So why don't we assume, like, the worst case scenario, let's say it's pulling 6, right? Here where we live, I'm on a flat rate plan, which is 14 cents per kilowatt hour. And, so if you take that 14 cents and let's just say that you precondition for a full hour for the sake of math instead of 45 minutes, right? That's going to cost you 14 cents times 6. So 60 cents, 84 cents to do an hour of preconditioning. So you won't have to do an hour. Your car is going to be like, you've been sent to hell. That's how hot it's going to be after an hour. But let's say you do for an hour. But if you do it for a half an hour, half that cost would be 41 cents or something like that. So, it's much less than your cup of coffee in the morning to precondition your vehicle.
The other thing too, I think we should mention is I rarely ever, I can't even remember the last time I had to scrape or brush my car off. Wow, 6.9 cents is great. I don't brush my car off because if it's snowing, I'll precondition the car and then it'll melt all the snow off the car. And my wife is she's a teacher, and she parks outside her classroom, and so she sees it snowing and she leaves the school at 3 o'clock. She'll turn the precondition on at, like, I don't know, 1:30, 2 o'clock, and the car will be entirely melted by the time she gets out, and then she doesn't need to brush her car off. So there's lots of benefits from preconditioning, not the obvious ones as well, but and yeah, you're right. I looked at the amperage. So my car pulls when I precondition it. It's gotten as high as 40 amps when the car is stone cold at like minus 20 degrees. But once it hits temp, it drops down to 5 or 6 amps, and just to maintain the cabin temperature and maintain the coolant flow through the battery. So it's not a lot of money to precondition. So
let's talk about the 110 volt, because what I've found the few times that I have used 110 is that it doesn't draw enough energy to be able to precondition and charge, right? Like it's It's just not enough. Have
No.
you had any experience with that?
I was stuck in a snowstorm in London, and first time I ever used
London,
one.
Ontario, folks.
London,
London,
Ontario,
Ontario, Canada.
and I tried. And I was trying to precondition the car in the morning. It was plugged in on a 110 overnight, and I tried to precondition. And so when you precondition, you can, but the charge that you're getting from the mobile connector on a 110 is not enough, and so your battery starts dying, right? Like you start using up your battery. And so I preconditioned for a half an hour and went back, and I found I lost 10% range in my car because the one I was thinking it would charge and precondition. So it was a hard lesson, but when you do the math and at 110 volts, 12 amps, it's like I don't think it's quite 2 kilowatts. So it's very, very tiny. So yeah, you can't really precondition on a 110.
Yeah, that's been my experience. So the question here, are all new builds coming with heated steering wheels now? So I guess that would be the 2021 Model 3 and Model Y. My understanding is that if you order today, the answer is yes. If you have a 2021 that you ordered previously, I got mine in end of November, but it's a 2021 Model Y. And there's still some of us holding out hope that a software update is going to enable it. If you have a 2020 Model Y or a 2020 Model 3, you will not get heated steering wheel, is my understanding. Okay.
I've never been a big fan of the heated steering wheel because I precondition so religiously. The steering wheel is nice and warm every time I touch it. So I really don't. I don't have a heated steering wheel in either one of my cars. So.
Thank you so much, Jordan. I appreciate the comment. Appreciate it. All right, so back to the scheduling. So I mentioned that I do use preconditioning for the battery, so pretty religiously. But scheduling, I found that because my routine isn't predictable, even back before COVID, in terms of needing to leave the house, right? I just haven't used it. But if you have a fairly predictable schedule, and I know that before COVID you certainly did, Kevin, and so you would swear by that as something that new owners or people thinking of getting a Tesla should consider doing when they get their Tesla, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And so the first thing we should talk about is there's been a recent change in the UI and the actual functioning of the scheduling feature within the Tesla.
Yes.
So that has changed recently. In some instances it's better. In one instance, I'm not as big of a fan, but I'll get to that. So there's two things. One is you can now schedule preconditioning, and you always could, and in a certain particular manner. But now you can actually set a time where you precondition, and you can actually include a charge up with that precondition. So the charging will finish by, or you need to depart by a certain time, and it'll precondition the cabin, and it'll make sure the battery's charged to the level that you have set it. And it will also take into account the time of day charging. So if you have a lower rate during a certain period of time of use electricity, you can now tell the car when that ends, and it'll make sure that it charges the battery up is to the point that you want it during the off-peak rate, and then it will precondition the cabin separately based on the time that you want to leave, right? And so it's a combination now of two things. It's the scheduling of low-cost charging and preconditioning both the cabin and the battery for your departures, right? There are also other things like scheduling using the app. We don't have it yet. I wish
you can precondition. I'm not sure if just Black House Brew got the two mixed up. You can precondition from the app by turning on you just can't schedule. Yeah.
There is a third-party app that I do use. It's only for Android platform right now, but and Tesla Canuck is he's very careful about who he gives his tokens to, so he doesn't lose it.
I
But yeah,
am.
there are third-party apps that you can use to schedule from the app. But you can also precondition. You can manually precondition from the app if you remember, right? Um, which I always remember because it's been drilled into me now that I don't like getting into a cold car. So.
Yeah. All right. So I just want to recap all the things that we've covered so far before we move on to our next topic, just for people who may have joined late and they can go back once the video is posted to see the segments they missed. But we talked about, in general, what to expect with Tesla winter driving. We watched a few videos. We talked about them. We talked about regen and the implications of cold battery and regen on icy surfaces. We talked about some of the winter driving features like slip start. We spent a lot of time talking about cold weather range loss and mitigation strategies around how to maximize your range in the wintertime. And we just wrapped up our charging strategies, preconditioning, and scheduling. The next item on the agenda, if you will, is rear-wheel drive versus all-wheel drive, and what would the recommendation be, right? And I think we need to break that down into a couple of different pieces, right? So um, I think the big question about rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive is what can your budget stretch to do, right? If you live in a northern climate and your budget can stretch to do it, I highly recommend all-wheel drive. All-wheel drive will do a much better job of getting you started, than a rear-wheel drive will. It's not going to help you stop. I know you feel strongly about that, Kevin. All-wheel drive does not help you stop. It's more like it helps you to get going. But that being said, if your budget can't stretch, the rear-wheel drive, and I'm going to pull up the video again, Kevin, if you want to kind of just continue that conversation, and we'll just show that again to see the rear-wheel drive in action.
Yeah, I was so because of my experience with a rear-wheel drive BMW I had. I didn't keep it for very long. It was really bad in the winter. I didn't think I'd ever own a rear-wheel drive vehicle again, and I did a lot of research before taking possession of my Model 3 rear-wheel drive. I wanted to be sure that I wasn't going to find the same thing with this car that I found in the past. And so, so I can tell you, I don't have that reservation anymore with my Model 3. In fact, I've kept my Model 3 rear-wheel drive long range simply because I haven't had any issues whatsoever, and it's been very predictable, very reliable in poor weather. So. I can't give it a better endorsement than that.
Yeah, it's and I echo that. And what this video here is showing you right now is there's about 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground, and I'm just trying to get the rear end to fishtail, and I'm just simply not able to do it. Tesla has built in some very sophisticated traction control systems into its vehicle, and rear wheel drive is 100% an option for you, even in a northern climate. Just again, I mean, I'm going to put a couple of caveats around that. One is the caveat that you need to have winter tires, right? And that's the same with all wheel drive. I always recommend winter tires. And the other one being is that you always need to drive for the conditions, right? It doesn't matter what you're driving. So if you take those two things into account, and your budget will only stretch to the rear wheel drive, let's say the Model 3 SR Plus, right? It is 100% viable in a northern climate like Toronto, Canada. Kevin, do you agree?
No, totally. Obviously, look, I'm not going to sit here and say if I had a choice, all-wheel drive is better than and rear-wheel drive. Period. Like, there's no, that's not a discussion. But it's if your budget can't stretch, or if you're in a position where you need to make a call, whether to do it or to wait. I would totally do it. I have no issue with my rear wheel drive. So there is a comment though I want to address about
Okay.
regen with all-wheel drive versus rear-wheel drive. And so the question is, do you get more regen with all-wheel drive than you do with rear-wheel drive? And so I've actually paid quite a bit of attention to this because my all-wheel drive Model X and my rear-wheel drive Model 3, and what I found is surprisingly, and maybe I just feel it more in my 3 than I do in my X, but I feel like the regen in my rear-wheel drive Model 3 is actually stronger than my regen in my Model X. And I don't
I
know
have
if
the
it's
opposite.
really, I don't know if it's
At
an
this point.
I don't know if it's an anecdotal thing where I feel it differently, or whether it's actually the case. But I think either way, it's pretty close, right? Like I don't know whether I'm getting it wrong or not, but I would say there's probably not a whole lot of difference one way or another. I mean, it's a little to the left or a little to the right, depending on the way you want to look at it, right? So
Yeah. I definitely noticed with my Model Y, having traded in my rear-wheel drive Model 3, that the regen is definitely, I call it, has more bite. I don't know what else to say about it, but it's stronger. All right, let's kind of segue. This is kind of a segue into this next video, right? And this was done with my Model 3 rear-wheel drive long range, and it's kind of a torture test. Basically, it's a icy hill and a steep grade, and I stop in the middle of it to see whether or not it will get going. So let me just click play on here. Oops. Yep, it's going. Okay, so here you can see I'm at 0 and I'm putting on the accelerator and it's not moving. And so when you gun it, it did not move. But then when I took it a little bit easier, let it roll back a little bit, I was able to get it moving forward up this steep hill. As you can see, is extremely icy, and I did not even have to use slip start to do it. So in terms of getting going, right? If you've got good winter tires, you're going to be able to get going with your Model 3 rear-wheel drive. I've only ever had to use Slipstream once, and I spent 2 full winters in that vehicle in these type of conditions. So yeah, I think the rear-wheel drive is definitely viable.
yeah, that was pretty brave of you to stop in the middle of the hill like that.
Yeah, well, I push the limits for the viewers, right? Because these things can happen to you, right? Like for circumstances out of your control, you might find yourself having, being in a dead stop on a steep grade, right? And what happens? So, now we know. Okay, so let's see if we've got some additional questions. And please, if you have questions, ask them. We're here to help you.
There's an
And
interesting comment.
get you the information you need.
There's an interesting comment on snow mode. I don't know if you see that one there.
Snow mode. Oh yeah, right here. Is that this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this has not been my experience. I'm not sure because I've heard people talk about snow mode, and I'm not really sure because I don't have a Model Y, so I don't know, or the all-wheel drive Model 3, so I don't know how those function. Maybe you can speak to that, Tesla Canuck. But for me, my Model X, when I punch it, I got all 4 wheels going. So I'm not sure why only the fronts would be working and not the rears, because that's not been my experience with my Model X. If I put it in slip start, I got all 4 wheels, peeling, right? So
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard of this, and I know where it's coming from. Actually, there's an article not too long on this not too long ago on this very topic, and my understanding is as well, the all-wheel drive does not engage unless the vehicle senses a slippage in one of the wheels, right? I guess the front wheels in this case, because I think it's a I think it engages the rear wheels first, right? Do you know, Kevin? Or
Are you referring to the 3 and the Y, or the X
the
and the
3 and
S?
the Y?
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I don't have personal experience because, like I said, I only have the rear-wheel drive 3, but my Model
yeah,
X does not do that. Like my Model X is
yeah,
all wheels all the time, right? So
yeah. I guess what I'm saying is that I'm not sure it's full-time all-wheel drive is what I'm saying, right? It only engages all-wheel drive when it needs to, right? And I think that's the same with the Model X, isn't it?
the
As far
Model
as I
X.
know,
Oh man, the
it's
Model
all
X. Man,
full-time all-wheel drive.
when I'm hitting the pedal on that thing, I got all four. I can feel all four wheels going.
Hmm.
So as far as I know, it might be a difference in behavior between the 3 and the Y platform versus the S and X, but um,
Yeah. So perhaps like, under load and stuff like that, or times where it engages. But I have been, I have noticed something like to this comment. There is something here that I think is happening where I've had the same experience as this commenter. So that's just, I'm curious about it myself, right? And I know that there was an article not too long ago where it did say that it only engages if it senses a slippage, in a wheel. So I don't know. Maybe I think Sandy Monroe will probably tear down a 2021 Model Y as well, and we'll have our answer. I like that
that
guy. That guy, he gets into the depths of it.
guy, he knows more about cars, period, than probably anyone else on the planet. The guy he's torn down so many of them, right? So there's a question in there, Paul, about if we had a choice, Model 3 rear-wheel drive or Model Y rear-wheel drive. If you had to if you had to buy one, which one would you choose and why?
Let me just try to find that question.
While you look for it, I'll give you my opinion.
Yes.
So there's two considerations in my opinion. One is space, the room that you need, and range. And the answer is different depending on how you answer that question. So the Model 3 gets way better range than the Model Y, like for like, and obviously the Model Y has way more space than the Model 3. So the answer is, at least in my opinion, is what do you value more? Do you need the space or do you need the range, right? And so I think personally, I think it's plus or minus a few $1,000. If you take that out of the equation, you answer that question. That's the answer for you. So
Yeah, and that's pretty much how I would answer it as well. I mean, what do you value more? Do you have a larger family? Do your kids play sports? These type of things where you might need the space. In which case, the Model Y would definitely be a better choice. The other option that isn't here, and maybe it's not one that you're interested in, but I thought I'd throw it out there for any viewers that might be interested in this, is that you could consider a used Model X as well, right? Last time I looked, a 2017 Model X 75D, you can get that for about the same price or maybe even less than a 2021 Model Y, right? And I think, me personally, I think that's a pretty viable option, especially if you need even more space, because the Model X is like, it's cavernous is what I would call it. It's noticeably bigger than the Model Y, and obviously quite bigger than a Model 3. So
yeah, I would say that's actually something I didn't think of, but you're absolutely right. Paul knows how much I love my Model X. I honestly, it is my favorite vehicle I've ever had, and it is cavernous. Like I fit this past summer, I fit 50 bags, 2 cubic foot bags of mulch in my Model X. It was an entire skid I fit in my Model X, and the guys at Home Depot basically said when they brought it out with a forklift, they're like, "You're never fitting all of that in that car, right?" And I had 10 bags in the frunk and the secret trunk before I even started packing the trunk. And so yeah, that's a great call. I mean, you don't get the same range that you would on even rear-wheel drive Model Y on a 75DX, but you know what? I've taken that thing all over Canada and the United States. It's not a big deal, right? So that's a good call. It's a really good call.
All right. So this next question here, I wanted to help with. So SR Plus or long range for driving to Florida once per year is one of the use cases. And so the way I'm going to answer this is a little bit different. I'm going to answer it with the Model X, actually, because my Model X is a 75D, which out of the factory only ever had at most 381 kilometers of range, I think it was.
20 miles.
Yeah, and the SR Plus right now I think is what, around 400 kilometers, right?
50.
So yeah, so it's fairly comparable. And we did drive our Model X to Florida and back, and it really wasn't an issue. We never felt any range anxiety. There's so many superchargers along either the I-75 or the I-95, depending if you're coming from Quebec, you're probably taking the I-95, but it was never an issue. Oh, we seem to have lost Kevin. I'm sure he'll be back, but it just was not an issue for us in terms of having any range anxiety. The trip took 33 hours, I think it was, so it takes a little bit longer than it otherwise would in, let's say, a Model Y with 530 kilometers of range. But your difference of 20 kilometers there, you're going to have the same experience as we did in the Model X. So totally doable.
Yeah, I would say, just because I would agree with you 100%. If you're doing the drive to Florida once a year, that and your daily driver, your standard range plus would cover your day-to-day driving issues, and you'll get the 13K rebate. To me, it wouldn't even be a question. I'd take the standard range plus over the long range.
All right.
Oh,
a new question up here for you, actually, specifically. So
so I've got a couple of different opinions on this one. So the best tire that I've ever used on my Model X, which is a lot heavier than the Model Y, is the Blitzak WS90s. They are just hands down the best tires I've ever used, and they're actually relatively inexpensive compared to some of the well, a lot cheaper than a lot of the Pirellis and a lot of the things that Tesla recommends. The downside is because they do grip so well, they tend to burn off a lot quicker. But you know what? They're half the price. So I'm happy paying half the price for a superior drive and replace them twice as often than a tire that is a lot more expensive. So that's my favorite tire for my X, and I would recommend it probably for the Y. I've also heard, I think KK also has Conti Viking 7s. I've heard really, really great things on the Conti Viking 7s. And then the last one is the Continental Winter Contact SIs. I've done a bit of reading on those, and while I've not used them, I've seen a number of videos. They tend to be very, very highly rated for heavier vehicles like Teslas. So.
All right, I just wanted to throw this comment up as another option in terms of the tires. All right, so I did want to try to keep this to 75 minutes or less. So we're getting into the final stretch here, and I want to make sure that anyone who's still with us, that we get your questions answered if you have any. So if you have one to ask, now's the time. Otherwise, we get to wrap it up early.
The Michelin X-Ices are pretty good too, I hear. I've not used them, but I read they're pretty good.
All right, we have a question that came in here. Door handle is more prone to freezing and causing trouble than other cars. Yeah, so The door, this is an interesting one because I know last year, or maybe it was 2018, 19, that winter, where after an ice storm in particular, there was a lot of people talking on Twitter about the door handles um, having frozen. And, first off, like, this happens to every car. I remember back in the day, and Kevin, you might remember this too, where you'd be locked out of your car because the key it was frozen. You couldn't get your key in. You'd have to go to Canadian Tire or, some other store and get some locked de-ice, right? Do you remember having to do that?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's not a unique problem to Teslas in terms of doors freezing. But what I found, and the advice that I give people is that the Tesla's not a porcelain doll, and I find that like a whack of the handle on the door just like that, it's not going to hurt your car, and it's unstuck my handle every time that there's been any type of issue. So that's how I feel about the handles. I don't think they're a problem.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I've never had much of a problem. You just you give it a little push or a little whack, and it breaks off whatever little ice. The windows, I have heard of people saying that the windows get stuck or whatnot. But again, if even I've never experienced it personally, it might be because I precondition so often. I warm the cabin, and so whatever ice is on the windows just melt, right? So. I've never experienced any issues that way. So
we've got another question here. Scan my Tesla app. Is this what Tesla Bjorn uses? I know he uses.
It is.
It is. Okay, that's why it sounded familiar to me.
Yeah.
I haven't done it myself. I don't know if that's something that you have experience with, Kevin.
It's funny that this question came because I've been looking at this and sitting. I'm on the fence. I'm very close to doing it, only because I love some of the stuff that the app tells you, like the temperature of the afterburners and the various different battery trying to calculate range and stuff like that, and so how much goes into waste heat versus drivetrain and so on and so forth. I love the idea. I may do it in the spring. I'm certainly not going to do it now because it's too damn cold, but to get out there and start playing around with the wiring. But I may do it in the spring. So and I will use, if I do it, I will use Tesla Bjorn's app and hardware that he's used. So.
All right, let's try to power through some here. So the main difference between driving the 3, Y, and X in the snow that I've noticed. That's a really great question. You might have stumped me a little bit on this one. I have to think about it. But I think like the Model X to me has always been just, maybe it's because it's heavier, right? But it's always felt the most confident in the snow of the 3, the Y, or the X. I'd say that the Y is very close behind in terms of how I feel and how stable it is in the snow and how confident. The Model 3, which still does a really great job, but I think because it's much lighter than the X, for example, that it just feels a little bit different in the snow. Not that I would have any concern with how it performs in the snow.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
Just yeah. Before you get into it, I noticed another one of my friends there, Andrew, was on the thread, and I know he has an all-wheel drive Model 3. And if you're still, on the video, maybe you can put something in the comments, Andrew, in terms of how you feel the 3 all-wheel drive is compared to what you've seen of the rear-wheel drive Model 3 that I had. All right, let's see here. Oh, sorry, Kevin, I cut you off.
No, I was just going to say I think the X. I think the X is by far the best in the snow, as well. I've driven other Teslas, and I've had the same experience. The X just is, that much better. So.
There's a tip for you on the windows. I do know a lot of people that do this, and it appears to work.
The benefit of that as well, sometimes in the spring, when after the winter, when you get a little bit of moisture inside the doors, when you close or open the window, sometimes squeaks. A little bit of that silicone lubricant also prevents that as well. It's a great all-purpose.
Yeah. FSD changes, Canadian winter driving. Actually, I did a video on this, and you know, no one in Canada has FSD beta right now that we know of. And I did a video kind of questioning whether or not it will work in the Canadian winter. And I don't have any of the screen captures from that handy. But one of the challenges I think that's going to be an issue for here in Canada and other northern climates that use salt, road salt, to eliminate ice on the roads, is that it cakes up over the cameras, right? The B pillar are usually fine, but it does cake up the rear camera and the side cameras. So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to test FSD beta in the winter. And I wonder if Tesla is actually waiting for spring before we get it here in Canada. Kevin, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think you might be right. I will comment on the autopilot in the winter. So I used to do a commute up and down a very jam-packed highway every day as part of my daily commute. And one of the things I found with autopilot was even when there was snow on the road, there was a lot of snow on the road, and there were sort of bare tracks. The the car was pretty good in autopilot of just, mind you, it was bump and go traffic, but the autopilot was really good at just staying, when there's no lane markings, just staying within the tire tracks of the other and using other cars to position itself. I obviously haven't done that this winter because I haven't been commuting downtown, but and based on, I know there have been changes to autopilot, but my experience is, depending on what the road conditions are like, autopilot was, I wouldn't call it great in poor conditions, but there were times where it was surprisingly good. So.
Okay. I have heard of this particular issue. I've not had any problems with it. So I think that this probably would occur when it's very cold and the car warms up, quickly. You might get some condensation there in the B pillar camera. But again, it hasn't been an issue for me. Any thoughts on that one, Kevin?
Yeah, I honestly, this is the first time I'm hearing about it. Maybe, yeah, I don't know how you'd prevent this other than maybe having something covering the B pillar until you're ready to go, right? And maybe insulating it a bit, but I don't know. I've not heard of this.
Yeah. I have heard of it. I know it's definitely an issue for some people who've reported this type of problem. So I think my guess would be, if it's what I've read, is that the condensation goes away and the cameras clear up after driving. But creator generator, maybe let us know if that's the case. Does it go away after you've been driving for a bit, or is it a persistent problem? Because if it is a persistent problem, I would contact the service center and have them take a look at it.
Yeah, I would say your cameras aren't sealed properly. So.
Okay.
Sentry mode will run. There's a comment here saying run Sentry mode and it'll clear the condensation.
Oh wow, really? Okay. Huh. That's
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I guess it would warm up the camera, I guess, because the camera would be operating. But I understand, like, the Tesla cameras are heated anyways, right? Mm-hmm. So, but that's a great suggestion. I trust Satin Gray Tesla. I've known him for a bit, so thank you for that comment.
There's a comment about foam in the tires. Is that necessary? Yeah, the tires come with foam in them from the factory. It's good for noise insulation, but I always get aftermarket tires, so I don't have any of those.
So I guess the issue, creator generator is saying that the issue gets worse at -20 or lower. So it's definitely a condensation issue. I might contact the service center on that and see if there's something that they can do for you, because yeah, that's not good. Autopilot and FSD are not going to work if the camera is blocked by condensation of some sort. So, all right. I think we'll probably wrap it up. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. I really appreciate the questions. We love doing this and answering your questions. We're going to be back once a month with a new topic. And again, we'll try to gear it towards helping folks who are thinking about making a buying decision around Tesla, and just continue to help you out the best we can, and give back to the community. So thank you very much again for joining us. Kevin, any other parting words?
No, I just thanks for inviting me. I really enjoy doing this, and enjoy your vehicles, guys.
All right, we'll see you on the next one, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers.